This was emotionally draining.
But for all the right reasons.
All the right reasons. This comic book movie, I don't know what to say without giving anything away. Well, we're gonna try our best here because there's a lot to unpack that we can't really unpack that thoroughly. So, how do we start this?
Well, honestly, I've heard a lot of people I've seen some people online refer to this as sort of maybe an equivalent to sort of Return of the King.
Probably, yeah.
And I think those comparisons are certainly apt at this moment.
It's certainly the conclusion of the entire Infinity Saga.
And it's a conclusion. Like, there's so much I think either of us want to start saying, but we are going to.
Let's just say we're doing this. Let's just say right up front, no, Ant-Man does not go up Thanos' ass. If he did, the movie would be over in 5 minutes.
So true. Of all things, how did that turn into a meme, for crying out loud?
I have no idea.
But I will say this much. There are, and I'm not going to go into specifics here, there are certain moments as this movie goes on that are going to be probably as well looked back upon as I'm Always Angry from the original Avengers movie.
Oh, yes.
And boy, oh boy.
It's the finale, the final battle of all final battles.
It's everything that we could have. I said it on Twitter not long after after we were done. After the movie finished, or maybe even when we were watching the credits, it was just like, this movie was everything. It was funny, it was sad, it was action-packed, full of just, cheer at the height of your voice moments, and
the 3-hour length is worth it.
Absolutely. Like,
because there's so much going on. Like, when the movie starts, you almost expect that, they've won already. But no.
They haven't.
Anything but. There's a whole other plan that has to come into effect. A plan that, I predicted this. This is a little spoiler. Using the quantum realm to time travel. And I think a lot of people predicted that.
I think that was pretty accurate, especially when we were starting to hear about production and everything, and seeing some shots of the actors in their
suits,
their
quantum suits.
Well, the quantum suits, but as well as when we saw some photos of them in their original Avengers.
That comes into play in one specific sequence.
Yeah, and we're not going to go into details for that one. So.
But that sequence is quite a trip because there's a lot of stuff going on in it that we never really expected.
No, and it's going to be something I think a lot of anyone who has been watching these movies for any period of time, they're going to catch it.
It's basically Back to the Future 2, but with a sort of twist.
That's a really good way to put it, I think. I mean...
And the twist that I mean is that the time travel in this film isn't the conventional kind of time travel that we're all used to in media.
Which, I don't think it's putting... I don't think it's too big of a spoiler to say they kind of put a nice big lampshade on top of that at one point.
Oh my God, that lampshade.
Like...
It's one lampshade on top of another lampshade on top of another lampshade on top of another lampshade.
It goes on for a good 10-15 seconds.
Yes.
And it works so well.
There is one thing that bugs me about the rules of time travel in this, that it's sort of ignored at a very crucial emotional part at the very end of the film.
I mean, I might need to see it again to see if it's kind of a breaking of the rules, and I think a lot of us are kind of still, like, we're all still kind of tripping over one another at this point, trying to, I mean, we're not only trying to just process everything that we've just seen, but there are so many moments in this movie that literally feel like just sucker punches to the gut, but and not sucker punches to the gut the way that it was in Batman v Superman, where
that was just like a funeral.
Yeah, it really was. This one,
there's a funeral in this, but
but
it's more deserving.
There's some awesome payoff in this movie.
There's
no two ways.
A lot of payoff in this.
I mean, we're tripping all over one another, and
I mean,
for myself, I am literally struggling trying to kind of hold myself together. Like, I mean, I'll just say this: when it all finished, I was wiping my eyes like every 5-10 seconds.
More emotional viewers will be crying like babies. I mean, I don't shed tears that easily, but I was feeling the emotions, and still am.
Yeah,
a little bit. It's God. Just reeling.
But again, I mean, this is earned. This is deserving. Imagine, if you will, that they actually did the death of Superman with a proper setup of films like what we've had with the MCU. This is basically that kind of a payoff, and I don't think that I'm going into any real spoilers. Like, we're trying very hard to adhere to don't spoil the end game for this, because I guarantee you most everyone that wants to go see this is probably going to go see it.
Spoiler! Get out of here!
I think that a lot of people who want to go see this movie have already gone to see it. I mean, we literally just got back. I mean, we saw one of the first showings of the night there, and I mean, it unfortunately, I would still say that the crowd from the original Avengers movie, I think, is still number one in my mind.
That was an enthusiastic crowd, and that was at 12 a.m.
Yeah, this one though, there was enthusiasm here, and when it gets to certain parts, you almost expected a standing ovation to pop in, and I'll just say it right now. The third act, your mind is going to be reeling with some of the imagery that you're going to see in that full stop. But I mean, everyone brings their A game to this one. You do some really great, bending of the time rules and everything. And you know what? I mean, those that are more astute with time travel stories can point out the plot holes here, and there, can probably do it. But when it's in service to the plot, and as long as they're not so glaring that it completely wrecks it, it's not something that I feel like that we need to bring up. We're not fucking CinemaSins, for crying out loud.
There are some permanent casualties.
Sadly.
We're not going into who, but it's going to be weird moving forward in Phase 4. I mean, what can we really say about what's in the future for the MCU?
I mean, thinking about, of course, Far From Home, which Paul Feige, thank you. I always mispronounce his name. I can't help it. Feige's already kind of said that Far From Home, to him, is going to be the conclusion of Phase 3, which I'm assuming, much like how Ant-Man was the conclusion from Phase 2.
Yeah.
I mean, you think about that. I mean, people were wondering, if certain things in Ant-Man could potentially be payoffs later on down the line, well, I think that it's pretty damn apparent. It's pretty damn apparent that was indeed the case.
And I should also point out to a lot of cynics out there, and you know who you are, that no, Thanos is not defeated single-handedly by Captain Marvel.
In fact, if you really want to get down to it, and I don't think it's much of a spoiler,
she's in about
Carol's in
25% of the movie.
Not even that, even. I think that she's only in for about 20 minutes. And that's not necessarily... And I'm not saying that as a bad thing. Let's just say her appearances work where they do. I kind of hope that she would have gotten some more Earth time with the Earthbound Avengers crew.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that any fan would probably say the same thing, but... That's a minor...
I mean, she's not even involved in the main plan.
Because she's taking care of business elsewhere.
Which is her thing.
Has always been her thing.
But the status quo has certainly changed.
And we wonder what the future holds. Like, we know, again, Far From Home is coming out, July, right?
Thereabout, yeah.
Yeah. Far From Home is from July, and then you have Guardians 3 is eventually going to come out.
After Suicide Squad 2, or whatever they're calling it.
Whatever DC's calling it, but you know what? I'm willing to give Gunn the benefit of the doubt for that.
I mean, after Far From Home, I think the next one in line is Shang-Chi.
Either Shang-Chi or the Eternals. I'm not sure which.
Oh yeah, the Eternals I think they announced that. Yeah,
they did announce that. So I mean, what we do have coming up are a lot of shows on Disney Plus.
There is
there's Falcon
and Winter Soldier, and there is Scarlet Witch and Vision.
Which, I mean, who knows how that's going to work?
Yeah.
But again, this is, Paul has had this idea pretty much since 2008, and I think that he knows that he needs to work on it.
And I remember that there were other TV shows discussed. I think for Freeform there was the New Warriors and Damage Control. I'm not sure if those are still on the table. I remember that Squirrel Girl got casted for New Warriors.
I mean, who knows at this stage? And I think a lot of people are just wondering about the conclusion of the Fox acquisition by Disney.
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't expect, at least when it comes to X-Men, I think Feige has already said that he doesn't expect to put them in right away, which is, I think, in my opinion, a smart move on his part, especially if certain something on the release slate turns out to be as bad as we've been hearing. I feel sorry for Simon Kinberg, believe you me.
Curiously, a lot of people predicted that the universe would be rearranged so that mutants come into existence, but no.
That might be something they do later on, but yeah, the status quo is shaken, but there's not much in the way of difference right now as the MCU was before Endgame came out. Everything's just been, there are characters that have taken their final bows. There are characters that are now off-world. Who knows what the future of the MCU is going to be? Mainly because I think that
I really want them to put a gas pedal to Fantastic Four, because we f***ing need a good Fantastic Four movie. Because we've had 2 duds, 1 disaster, and 1 that was never even released.
I mean, you have to think that at least has to be in, kind of the pre-talk phase with Kevin and all that.
Here's hoping.
They'd be foolish not to. They'd be foolish, and you know what? I think enough people have kind of sort of expunged, what was it, 2015
that Fan Four Stick came out.
Yeah.
I think it was 15.
Yeah, it was like 2015 because it was around the same time
that was a disaster.
Yeah, less said about that, the better. But I think that enough people have kind of pushed that out of sight, out of mind, where they could easily do a more classical version of that. And again, I absolutely agree with the people that say, make them a time and make them a family that.
Watch Movie Bob's proposal on how he would do a Fantastic Four movie in the MCU,
and it's a good one, and especially since now that we've seen how, let's just say, now that we've seen how something works in this movie, it's not outside the realm of possibility to think, you could easily do something of a displaced family from the 60s all of a sudden showing up, say like in 2020 or something, or whatever year they decide to set it in. I mean, if there was any doubt about that beforehand, this movie kind of puts that to rest. And you certainly have to wonder now. I mean, and I think one of the good things as well that they worked on, that they have is, again, a lot of the folks that have there's a lot of folks that have it that are set up well going forward. I mean, you're gonna get a second Captain Marvel movie. You're gonna get a second Black Panther movie. You're gonna get a second Doctor Strange movie. Those are probably the big three for you, at least for the moment going forward. And then Guardians 3. Then you try to kick off a couple new ones. You still have Spider-Man there. I mean, there's nothing to me that basically says that they can't, have room for more in this. But again, one of the great things about the MCU is that they never seem to push themselves, too far. I mean, I think at the moment things are looking up for them, and I think that, they shouldn't feel the rush to try to equate what Endgame has become, and I think that that's actually one of the better things. Like when we knew that that Avengers was going to be that the third Avengers movie was going to be a two-part affair.
Mm-hmm.
Like we kind of knew going at least at the start of it that this was. It was kind of an understanding, I think, even at the time, that this was probably going to be the last hurrah for a bunch of the originals.
Mm-hmm. Their contracts. I mean, they can only do so many for so long.
Yeah, and a lot of these other guys, like Chris Evans, bless his heart, he's one to do filmmaking of his own now, and he wants to get involved with a lot more of like social work and everything. God bless the man. Let him do whatever the heck he wants. Undoubtedly, the MVP of the Infinity Saga. I think in total. I think that anyone who, remembered him as Johnny Storm from the Fantastic Four,
he's ascended beyond that.
He really has.
Is Captain America the way Christopher Reeve was Superman,
the way Tobey Maguire was Peter Parker and and I think that, and again, that's the important thing, I think, as well, that I think that is always the underrated secret as to why, these seem to work. Marvel understands there's always a man behind the mask.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's always been what they've done since day one. I mean, Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark, Chris Hemsworth as Thor, Jeremy Renner as Hawkeye, Scarlett Johansson as Black Widow. What they have done better than I think anyone has ever done is that they have found great actors to play the men and women behind the masks.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's really kind of the first thing that they do, and then from there you build the personalities on it from there, and it's worked to great effect.
There's a couple of physical changes to a couple of Avengers. One which is actually accurate to the comics, and the other is, wow, what the hell did they do to him?
rest assured, they got a great reaction from the crowd.
Yeah.
There were a lot of laughs to be had. And I think that I think that there's going to be some folks that are going to be quite pleased at some subversions, so to speak.
So, is there anything else to add?
Unless we start going into details on spoilers at this point.
Not today.
Probably not. I think that the rest of just what we got to say is just this much. Just go see this movie, guys. You know,
It's been worth the wait.
This is 10 years in the making. We've watched pretty much every
11 years.
10, 11 years, whatever. We've been watching pretty much every single Marvel Cinematic Universe movie up to this point. And seeing it all unfold one at a time and then see it all pay off like we did tonight. I mean, so it's something that's going to stick with you.
Yes.
I don't think there's any two ways about it.
So, until the next big MCU release, Excelsior.